Okay, now we're going to look at how to use SPSS to run a t-test, and remember that a t-test is looking at the difference between two means. So it's comparing a mean on two variables to see whether those means are statistically significantly different. So I'm going to go to Analyze, Compare Means, and I'm going to choose Independent Samples t-test. I'm going to choose that because I'm looking at different groups of people. There are other kinds of t-tests, but for our purposes, we're going to use the independent samples t-test here. So I'm going to click on that. And my test variables, the ones that we talked about in class, are going to be, for my first t-test, are overall tech use by educational level. So I first want to pull in my dependent variable, which is the overall, and this is really overall quality of tech use. So I'm going to put that into my test variable. So that's my dependent variable I'm looking at. That's the thing I'm expecting to be different between my groups. And I want to look by education level. So this is middle school or high school. So I'm going to put education level into my grouping variable box, which you could also call this the independent variable box. This is the thing that is not changing. This is static. Now SPSS is going to ask me to define my groups, and by defining my groups, I mean, what does your data say? So group 1 middle school is coded as a what? And so in my data set, in here, see education levels right here, it's either coded as a 2, let me see if I can scoot that over, it's coded as a 2 or a 1. 1 is middle school, so I want to, group 1 is going to be my 1 values. Group 2 is my 2 values, so that's my high school group. So you're going to have to tell the test what your 2 groups are numerically. If I click on options for the t-test, it doesn't really provide me any information. I don't really need to change anything here, but I just wanted to show you don't need to change anything for the t-test. So I'm going to click continue. So again, I'm looking at overall tech use by education level. For middle school, that's my 1, and high school is my 2 group. And I'm going to click OK. And my output showed up back here. So let me scoot this over a little bit. I'm going to move my window up so it'll show. I'm trying to get this video to be a little bit better quality. So the t-test will give you 2 tables. The first one is the descriptives. This automatically happens in the t-test. So you can see overall tech use is my dependent variable. My 2 groups are middle school and high school. The means are 2.33 about and 1.75, and they're my standard deviations. I can ignore standard error of the mean for now. But here is kind of what I really want to focus on, and let me make sure you can see this whole table, or at least almost the whole table. So this is my t-test table. This first part of the table, these first 2 columns, I want you guys to ignore the first 2 columns, because this is a test for equality of variance, just to make sure that our sample is not too skewed one way or other. But we're going to kind of ignore this table, and I want us to focus on the top row down here of the remaining columns of my actual t-test table. So I've got overall tech use, and if I look right here, this third column gives me the t value. So that is the measure that this test gives me back. This is not going to be a super meaningful number to you in terms of, it's not really like correlation. Like this t-value doesn't really tell you the strength of a relationship. So just know that there is a t-value for the test. The most important probably number here is the significance value. Remember, we talked about the correlation test too, that the sig stands for significance. It's the same thing as the p-value. And remember, with correlation, if the test was significant, I got asterisks to tell me so. But remember, on this one, SPSS will not give you an asterisk, so you have to interpret this significance value on your own. And remember that we said that a p-value that's less than 0.05 is significant. So in this case, my p-value is 0.028, which is less than 0.05. So I can say that this t-test is significant. So what does that mean practically speaking, or how would I discuss that? What is that saying? So what this t-test is saying is that there is a significant difference in these two means, in the level of overall quality of technology use in middle school and in high school. So there is a significant difference between these two groups in the quality of their use of technology as observed in this particular sample. I could also say, that would be one way to say it, is that there is a significant difference in the means. I could also say that middle school teachers showed a significantly higher quality of use of technology because their mean is higher than high school teachers. So that would be two ways to interpret this information. I can ignore the rest of these columns for now. So really, when I'm looking at the t-test table, I'm going to look at the t-value because that's going to go in my report table, and I'm going to look at the significance value to tell whether or not there's a significant difference between the two means that I was testing. Okay, so let me go back to, so here's my t-table. So I'm going to look at how would I put this information in my APA table. So remember, I'm comparing the means on overall quality of tech use between middle and high school teachers. So that is exactly what my title says, t-test results for middle and high school overall quality of technology use. There's not a perfect way to make a title. As long as you describe your variables pretty well and your title makes sense, you're okay. The important thing is to tell people what information they're about to see in your table. This table has a pretty specific, let me make it a little bit bigger, has a pretty specific layout. So the row is the dependent variable, so the overall quality of technology use. There's only one row in a t-test if you format it the way that we have right here. The columns are your two groups, middle school in this case, the number of observations, high school, number of observations, and then you put the mean and standard deviation for each group. So in this case, I've got 2.33, my means are 2.33 and 1.75. You're going to put the t-value, so if you go back over here to my table, remember my t-value is right here, my third column over. So really the only information you're going to pull from the SPSS table is the t-value. So over here I put my t-value 2.228, and remember when I looked at my p as in Paul value, the significance value was less than 0.05. So I'm going to put one asterisk right here to indicate that it was statistically significant. Some folks asked in class, do we have to put this information in our table? For your research project, you will want to. If this information ends up being on your final, we will not expect that you will put a key. This is just how your variable was coded. It just lets people know that my means should be between 0 and 4 because that's what my scale was. So this is really for your reader, so you won't be expected to add that information. You will probably want to put a note about the p-value though here. You generally do say in my table 1 star equals that p is less than 0.05. So that just again helps your readers interpret, what does that mean? What does that asterisk mean in this case? Okay, so let's go back to SPSS and we're going to run one more t-test and fill in our blank table. So I'm going to click back here, and remember, it doesn't matter if I can see the data, as long as I can see analyze, I'm good. So I'm going to click analyze. We're comparing means, so compare means. I'm going to go down to independent samples t-test. And for this t-test, I want to look at the availability of technology for the same group. So I know there's a significant difference between the quality of their use of technology, and so I want to see, well, was there a difference in the availability of technology between the two? So I'm going to click on overall tech use and kick that out. And remember, we're at the very bottom of our variables for availability. Click on availability and move that one over. In this case, I don't have to change my groups because I'm using the same groups. If you were looking at a different group, you would have to pull in another independent variable, but in this case, we don't have to do that. Same group. So I'm going to click OK. So now I'm comparing the means between the availability of technology for middle school group 1 and high school group 2. All right, so let's look at our t-test. So you see there's my dependent variable, tech availability between education level, middle school and high school. So I've got means, standard deviations. I can tell just by looking that the means are different from one another. One is higher, but the t-test again tells me if there's a statistically significant difference between my two groups. So remember, I'm going to kind of ignore these first two columns. I'm going to assume that I'm going to use that top row. This is my t-value, 2.627. Again, that's not super meaningful in terms of how should I interpret that. What we're really focused on is whether or not the significance value is less than 0.05. And you can see that it is again less than 0.05. So what this tells me is that there is a statistically significant difference between the availability of technology between my two groups, middle school and high school. I could also say that middle school teachers had significantly more technology available in my sample than high school teachers did. So you can say that there is a difference. You can also say which one is higher than the other. Okay, so let's scoot this out of the way and go back over here to my table. So remember, I'm comparing tech availability between middle school and high school. So I've got my title and I'm going to say middle. This is very similar to the one above it. I'm just copying what I had. High school. So t-test results for middle and high school availability of technology. Okay, and then I'm going to label my columns. So I've got middle school, and I can just highlight that, middle school. Whoops, go down a row and put it's an italicized N if we're being technical. Middle school is, in this time it's 26. See here I have 26 observations. Last time I only had 24. And then high school, my other group, italicized lowercase n, and that one n is 124. See right there in my table, 124. So I'm going to say 124. And then I'm going to put my dependent variable here, which is tech availability. So tech, we'll say just tech availability. And then I'm going to put the mean and standard deviation for each one. And remember, that comes from my statistics table. Whoops, let me scoot that over right here. So 2.0, and I'll round that up to 8, 2.08. And the standard deviation is 0.845. APA likes you to put 2 digits after the decimal point for mean and 3 for standard deviation, just to be picky. My mean for high school is 1.61, and my standard deviation rounds to 0.814. So I can see those right there in that top table. My t-value, remember we said this is the only value that I'm really going to take out of this table directly, and my t-value is right there. It's that top one. I'm using the top row, so 2.627. I'm going to put the whole thing, no rounding, all the digits. And then remember we said that our significance value, or our p-value, is 0.010. So I'm going to put 1 asterisk y1, because remember my 3 levels are 1 star for less than 0.05, 2 stars for less than 0.01, and we talked about that in class. This is equal to 0.01, but it's not less than 0.01, so I get 1 star for that instead of 2. And then actually here I need to put a star here to say, or an asterisk, to say an asterisk equals p is less than 0.05. So what does this tell me? This tells me again, that there is a statistically significant difference between the availability of technology between middle school and high school teachers in my sample. So that is how you run, interpret, and then put results for a t-test into an APA table.